morning, everyone. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Regent Bartell?
Here.
Regent Bradley? Regent Conley-Kingsley? Regent Crane? Here. Regent Danae Davis?
Here.
Regent Stan Davis? Regent Drew?
Here.
Regent Peters? Regent Salvo?
Here.
Regent Loftus? Regent Oppenheim?
Here.
Regent Pruitt?
Here.
Regent Smith?
Here.
Regent Spencer?
Here.
Regent Baskin?
Here.
Regent Walsh? Regent Wingate? Regent Womack?
Thank you. It's my understanding that Regent Womack is on her way, and that Regent Wingate is on his way. And Regent Walsh is here. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you all so much for making it on these sort of maybe joining us online via streaming audio and video. So please remember to use your microphones. Yesterday was a trying day for all Wisconsinites due to the treacherous driving, heavy snow, power outages, and cooped-up children who are all too happy to miss a day of school. We should, however, also acknowledge our university on a bigger scale. Is that feedback? Something. Okay. Speaking of the so-called essential staff, even though I think in spite of the weather, police and safety officers kept watch over our campuses. Residence hall staff and food service workers were at their stations to ensure that and agricultural research stations to care for animals big and small. And of course, our facilities and grounds crews were exceptionally busy yesterday and this morning of educating 178,000 students today. Hats off to all those and others who went out of their way and beyond the call of duty yesterday. And a special thanks to the Memorial Union staff and our AV technicians who managed to get here early this morning so we could hold this meeting today. Could we give them all a round of applause? We will have a modified, somewhat due to the circumstances, we somewhat modified our agenda, which you should have heard about yesterday. Unfortunately, we missed the WIMR tour this morning, which I know a lot of regents, and as well as I'm sure chancellors and guests and others were looking forward to. We will make an effort, thanks to the promise of Chancellor Martin, to reschedule that tour at some point down the road when we meet again in Madison. We are also going to move the discussion on quality, affordability, and differential tuition to Friday morning. I think that is those are the principal modifications of our agenda, and we're hoping that otherwise we're going to go forward and enjoy the very special arrangements that UW-Madison as the host campus this morning have made for us. Although we meet regularly in Madison, we don't always focus on the campus itself. And we're going to do that beginning this morning with Chancellor Biddy Martin's presentation, A World-Class Research University for Wisconsin and the World. She'll discuss how the state's largest public research institution benefits all of Wisconsin, its economy, and the global community. We all know that there are many advantages to having a research and teaching engine like this in our state, and we'll hear more about how those advantages ripple throughout the broader statewide community. This resource enriches our culture, expands our understanding of the wider world, and makes Wisconsin the state that it is. So it's my pleasure to welcome Chancellor Biddy Martin.
everyone.
Good morning.
Well, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for coming, especially in this weather. We're delighted to host you. And I have many people to thank, but I'll hold off on that until later today or tomorrow morning. I want to congratulate you for getting here safely. And before I talk, as I should warn you I'm going to do, about how great UW-Madison is, I want to say that we do a lot for the system. And last night, for example, we lost to Green Bay in basketball. After beating Duke a week ago. So sometimes we're up and down a little. Anyway, congratulations to UW Green Bay. It's a fabulous win and a great thing for the system. Is the UW Green Bay Chancellor here yet?
We still celebrate.
You still celebrate. We were up early on the other hand. All right, well, thank you very much. I want to tell you how we've structured the program for today. This morning I'm going to make some remarks, and after my remarks you're going to see what I would call the first draft of a video that we're producing for use with our alumni, donors, and other constituencies. At the moment it features three initiatives, three ways in which we are committed to innovation in research, teaching, and education, and public service, And after the video I'm going to introduce to you two faculty members who will share with you a brief account of their work, introduce you to some of their undergraduate student researchers, and also tell you why they're at UW-Madison. Later in the day and at various committee meetings, you're going to hear from our student government leaders, from our provost, from staff and facilities and planning. At lunch and at the reception, at dinner tonight, you will all have an opportunity to spend time with your student hosts, who were very enthusiastic about being assigned to Regents and Chancellors, and I hope you'll have time to spend with them and get to know them a little better. You'll also spend time with student leaders again and with faculty and staff leadership, our faculty senate, university committee or steering committee, and ASIC. And your dinner will be followed by performances by three student groups, two hip-hop inspired groups, First Wave, which is a spoken word performance group, Hypnotic, which is a dance group, and then the a cappella group, Mad Hatters. So you'll want to stay right through the dinner. So I want to use my time this morning to talk about why it matters that we have a world-class research university in the system and in the state. And it may seem unnecessary to some people to make that case, but I want to put the question of why it matters in a little bit of an historical and international context. Before I do, I want to ask the question or try and answer the question, what makes UW-Madison unique? And that can be answered in a number of ways, so I don't pretend that this is the only way to think about it. But one of the things that makes it unique, I would say, is its particular combination of breadth, size, quality, interdisciplinary work, big ideas, a long history of contribution to the state, the nation, and the world, and its spiritedness and sense of fun. And I have a slide to demonstrate the fun we had yesterday. This was Bascom Hill, and this is the snowball fight. We were trying to beat the world record for the number of students participating in the snowball fight, and it said that we didn't quite make it. We had over 3,000 students, but the record is 3,500 apparently. I think we had some undercounting, but that's all right. Nonetheless, the place is spirited, the place is big, and I went to Bascom Hill to watch the snowball fight, and it was fabulous. The students and faculty at UW-Madison, as many of you know, are enormously talented, forward-thinking, as we like to say, and ambitious. And they're here basically because they push the envelope in some way or other, or in many different ways. We depend, as I think you know, on a mix of revenue sources, with state funding now making up approximately 20% or a little less than 20% of our total budget. We rely increasingly, therefore, on private funding, and some people worry that our public purposes will be threatened by this revenue mix, but this university has a long commitment to public purpose, and that will never change. This university remains what I would call Steenbockian, and you will all recall that Harry Steenbock discovered the importance of vitamin D and how to intensify its presence in food. And it brought him an offer from Quaker Oats of $1 million back in the 1920s. So that, in today's dollars, would be tens of millions or more that he was offered from Quaker Oats. And Harry Steenbock considered it problematic to make money on vitamin D for himself alone, given the institution's investment in his work and given the state's investment in the institution. So he is responsible for the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, for our intellectual property transfer operation, which ensures that our faculty's and students' discoveries are available to serve the public good. Even where our discoveries aren't commercializable, our faculty, staff, and students continue the Steenbockian tradition of invention, entrepreneurship, and commitment to the institution and the state. Some of the most important projects enabled by public spiritedness, passion for discovery, and the talent of our faculty and students, as well as the size of our institution, are our current efforts in alternative energy. We have the only Department of Energy approved site for the study of biofuels, the only university site. All of your other funds for major efforts in alternative biofuels went to DOE labs. We're the only university that was awarded such a grant. I would include the work that's going on in engineering and nuclear energy and in other forms of alternate energy. And our efforts in biofuels and in alternate energies through engineering will be combined in a new facility, the Wisconsin Energy Institute, the planning for which is underway. In addition, we have a relatively new global health initiative underway on campus. It's a new initiative we've undertaken. We're part of a 50-plus university consortium in the United States working on global health. We have faculty in engineering and in agriculture and life sciences working on regenerative medicine, that is the use of stem cells as a platform for developing medical treatments for veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan, focusing in particular on craniofacial and orthopedic issues. And they're working collaboratively with faculty at Michigan and Illinois and hope to be funded at a very high level by the United States Army. We have faculty from a range of disciplines working through the Center for the Humanities on definitions of what it means to be human in the face of 21st century changes. We have faculty at the Weissman Center who are combining neuroscience with studies of meditation and contemplative practices, combining the humanities and the sciences to answer questions about what a healthy mind actually is and how they can be developed. We have efforts on the part of the medical school to train doctors and provide incentives for them to practice in rural parts of this state. And of course, I could go on and on. Our size, our geographic reach, and quality allow for surprising connections among people, relationships across disciplines, across colleges, across institutions, and across nations, across the boundaries between and among students, staff, faculty. And the engagement doesn't stop with institutions of higher learning, of course. Part of what I think makes UW-Madison truly special is the fact that there's such a porous membrane between the university and the city of Madison, the region, and the state of Wisconsin, as well as other parts of the world. The Wisconsin Institutes for Discovery are a great example of a project that was conceived in a partnership between the university and private donors and business people. And it is a project that will house cutting-edge research in biotechnology, and it will also increase the speed with which our discoveries are brought to market. But among other things, it's going to be a gathering place on this campus for people from all over the university, but also from all over the state. It will combine biotechnology advances with K-12 education outreach, and in the hopes of developing more students for STEM fields. So I promise to reflect in a larger context on what it means that we have a major university of this sort in the state and why it's important that it thrive. I'm going to draw on the widely cited article that appeared in The Economist in 2005. It was called The Brains Business. I'm sure some of you read it or that you remember it. If you don't, that's okay. Now this is a slide you won't be able to see very well, but this is the front page of the article. It's an article that seeks to establish a larger context in which it makes sense to say that higher education is experiencing a golden age. So the editors of The Economist argue that higher education is experiencing a golden age worldwide. And even in the midst of a recession, and even though we may have to pull back from our day-to-day lives to see that we're in the midst of a golden age for higher education, the truth, I think, is that we are, in fact, in a golden age of higher education. And it's driven, according to The Economist, by three developments. Massification, by which they mean the significant increase in the number of people around the globe with secondary education. Globalization, by which they mean, of course, the interpenetration of cultures, economies, and even nations. And third, the emergence of a knowledge economy. And the result of these three variables, massification, globalization, and the emergence of a knowledge economy, means that countries all over the world are making massive investments in higher education. And many of them are drawing on the American model of the research university. And many of them are investing at this point far more than we are, in part because they're working to catch up, and in part because they're also a little more forward-looking, I think. So what does the Economist like about American higher education, and why do the authors suggest that it's a good thing that American higher ed be a model for the rest of the world? First of all, what they like about the system of higher ed in the United States, they say, is that it's not a system at all. That is, it's government-supported, but it's not government-controlled, not by the federal government, at least. As a result, American higher ed has a range of different kinds of institutions with different missions, allowing it to serve a wider range of populations than other higher ed systems in the world. It's also required, the institutions in the United States, to compete for the best faculty and students, ensuring quality in a free market system, and the Economist celebrates that need to compete. U.S. universities, they say, teach the widest range of possible subjects, a far wider range of subjects than universities in other parts of the world. And we have developed a much more sophisticated infrastructure for science and technology than other higher ed systems. Overall, according to The Economist, the United States continues to do the best job of combining what they call equity and quality. And by equity, they mean access and quality.
You are now rejoining the main conference.
Well, that's good to know. Yeah. So my point here is that a great sense of urgency has been created by the realization, and here I quote our own government, the U.S. government, in a 2005 statement. A great sense of urgency has been created by virtue of the fact that nearly two-thirds of all high-growth, high-wage jobs created in the next decades around the world will require a college degree. End of quote. Educating more degree holders, therefore, is absolutely essential, and this UW system, which has to be one of the finest in the world among the non-system that higher education is in the United States, is doing its part. As important as it is to graduate more degree holders, that's one part of what universities in the 21st century are expected to do and need to do, given the age of global knowledge economies. And according to The Economist, the most significant development in higher education in the world is the emergence of what they call a super league of global universities. That's the most significant development over the past decade. And here's what they say about those universities that belong to a super league of global universities. These universities have the potential to attract the most talented faculty and students to their parts of the world, employ a growing number of qualified staff to support the academic mission, generate the ideas and technologies that will drive the world's economies, and transfer their inventions into commercial uses that create wealth. Every country wants and needs such global economic players. And you might be able to see this. This is the ranking that The Economist uses, that they find compelling. This is a ranking done by Shanghai Xiaotong in China of the world's great universities. It's a ranking that uses a mix of indicators of faculty quality and productivity, including Nobel Prize winners, National Academy members, articles in respected journals. And this list of universities in the so-called Super League worldwide has only 4 public universities, or I believe it may be 5 in the most recent ranking, in its top 20 in the world, and UW-Madison is ranked 17th in the world. As you can probably see from the flags, most of the universities that they rank in the top 20 in the world are in the United States, or in Japan or Great Britain. Now, I want to return to the paragraph I read just a few minutes ago and tell you how it is, I think, that UW-Madison manages to rank 17th in the world according to these indicators. and then talk about, again, why that's so important. First of all, the quality of the faculty and the students. Remember that the economist says these institutions have the potential to attract the most talented faculty and students to their parts of the world. And it's very important, I think, to their parts of the world. The quality of the faculty at Madison is extraordinary. I'm not going to read through the material on these slides, and in fact, I'm probably going to frustrate you all by showing slides because there's not enough time for me to comment extensively on them. But these are just some of the indicators of the quality of Madison's faculty and its programs. And you're welcome to have the slides after the talk. These are selected national rankings. These are some of the departments, but not all, that are ranked by the National Research Council or even the U.S. News and World Report as being in the top 10 or close to the top 10 in the nation. And again, this is just a selection. National leadership in research and scholarship, I'll return to that in a second, but here are just some examples. I spoke a moment ago about the Great Lakes Bioenergy Research Center, which is bringing in $125 million from the Department of Energy. In physics, we have the IceCube project at the South Pole, $40 million a year. And what are they doing? Working on neutrinos. The work they're doing could lead to answers to the question of the Big Bang and the origins of the universe. So not insignificant work. And in medicine, we are an NIA Alzheimer's Research Center, $6.9 million. Now, as for the economic impact, I'm going to come back to that again in a minute in a little more detail. But what we've done here is tried to show the return per GPR dollar invested when it comes to total research awards for our faculty. And I'm also giving you the average faculty research award for the years between 2002 and 2007. We have 44 National Academy members, 20 members of the Institute of Medicine, 19 members of the National Academy of Engineering, and so on and so forth. These are recent Guggenheim Fellows and some of the areas in which they're working. They're not all science, as you'll see, but also music and social sciences. We have 2 honorary knights, just in case you wanted to know. One in France and one in the Italian Republic. In the arts, Jen Wen Yu, who's familiar to many of you, was elected president of the World Dance Alliance, and art professor Lisa Gralnick's work has been acquired by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Okay, so we are, as the economist points out, one of those universities that can attract talented faculty from all over the world. We also attract students from all over the world. We have 42,000 students, and this is the breakdown of the students we have, undergraduate, graduate, and professional. These are our numbers for degree production 2007, 2008, and I'm confident that some of you in the back won't be able to see those numbers. The point here is the talent of our students and the heterogeneity and breadth of the geographic range we have, which is not only national but international. These are 3 undergraduate students working in an entrepreneurship class, and these are undergraduate students working in a stem cell lab. So we're concerned not only about the quality of the students coming in, but the quality of their educational experience and the integration of the wonderful research that occurs here with undergraduates' education and with our outreach. This is the distribution of our alumni by state, again, just to show the geographic reach of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Our students come from all over the nation. They come from all over the world. And one of the things I would like to do is increase the numbers of students at the undergraduate level who come from other countries. I think increasingly, and that would be part of the argument I'm making here using the economist's essay, I think increasingly if our students don't live and work and build networks with students from all over the world, they will be at a serious disadvantage going forward. The economist also suggests that great global universities are magnets for jobs and employment. I just wanted to give you a sense of our working community. We have 20,690 employees at the current time. When it comes to research excellence, again, we like to remind people that we are usually second or third in the amount of research funding and expenditures in the nation. That includes all universities, public and private. We're national leaders in a number of major awards for research. Again, I'm going to go through these quickly. They are meant simply as evidence to back up the claims, and I'm happy to provide you the slides later. This is a front page of the National Science Foundation. This is their homepage, actually, from a couple of weeks ago. And I show it to you only because not only the Mastodon story, but every single story on the front page of the National Science Foundation's homepage for that week was a project undertaken at UW-Madison. So we are among the top 10 institutions in science and engineering in terms of millions of dollars for research. We're third. We're first in non-science and non-engineering fields for research dollars. We're 10th in patents. This is a slide that was produced by the provost, Paul DeLuca, who's a medical physicist. You could imagine that I wouldn't have produced it as a humanist, but it's a great slide, and I appreciate his permitting me to use it. This is just another way to measure the impact of the research that's done at UW-Madison. The different colors around the rim are different disciplines, and you see how evenly distributed our impact is. This is citation count, how evenly distributed the impact is across disciplines around that rim. But what you see in the middle, these clusters in the middle, are interdisciplinary work. So we also have an extraordinary impact not only in specific disciplines, but by virtue of the interdisciplinary work that we do. And this is a slide that has a little movie attached to it that shows startup companies that have been spun out of work done at UW-Madison. I'm not going to show you the movie because things crash every time we show it, but I do want to point something out, and that is that all the pink dots, which are here on the bottom sector, are startups undertaken by students. So this is a plotting of the total number of startups spun off from UW-Madison, but all of the pink dots are either undergraduate or graduate students. When we think about economic impact and the attraction of talent, but also the creation of growth, economic growth and wealth, as The Economist emphasizes, we have presented many times, and I think many of you are aware of the contributions that the university's research park makes, the contributions that the research and outreach make to existing industries as well, and the economic benefit to the state, obviously, simply of the amounts of people that we employ. Now, The Economist also identifies a number of challenges for the United States and its system or non-system of higher education, and I want to mention those and say something brief about their implications for us. They identify affordability as one major challenge in the United States, challenges to free and open inquiry as another challenge, and failure to be accountable for strong undergraduate education as another challenge for world-class research universities in this global league. They also identify what they call threats to value, quality, and meritocracy in the United States. And first on their list is public resistance to taxes that would allow government support for education to keep pace with costs. And second on their list of threats to quality and meritocracy in the United States is the erosion of peer-reviewed competitive funding in favor of earmarks. I'm not going to focus on the second because UW-Madison very forcefully promotes peer-reviewed work, and I really don't think we have any commentary needed there. I do want to mention something that The Economist emphasizes very, very heavily, and that is the importance they attach to the way higher education is organized in the United States. You will remember at the beginning that I said one of the things they think makes higher ed in the United States great is the fact that it's not really a system, that it's government supported but not government controlled. And the relative autonomy of universities from government control and flexibility to compete for the best is part of what they think accounts for the success of the best universities. Flexibility would mean flexibility in pricing, in salaries and wages, in purchasing, in facilities, and in personnel policies. These are the forms of flexibility among major universities and also minor universities that help us meet the challenges of reduced state funding. To remain one of the world's great universities, we're going to need to pay market faculty salaries, and we're going to need to provide our students with financial aid. We're going to need to provide our faculty, staff, and students with the facilities and infrastructure to do the work that leads to these great discoveries and has an economic multiplier effect. And we're going to need more flexibility so that we can help ourselves in an era of declining state support. When it comes to accountability, it's going to be very important over time to find the right balance between autonomy and accountability. And when it comes to accountability, UW-Madison is focused on a number of areas where we think we could do better by the state and better by the world and, in fact, better by the planet. And I've listed some here. Affordability, and the Madison Initiative for Undergraduates, which the Regents approved last year, is aimed at addressing a number of these challenges. We need financial aid to ensure that our students can attend UW-Madison regardless of their economic background. We cannot afford to compete on the scale that I've tried to show you here by keeping tuition low. We are, even with the differential tuition that you approved for Madison last year, we are still with Iowa at the bottom of our peer group. And I'm talking about a peer group defined as the Big Ten. If you compare us to the peer group of global research universities, we're so far at the bottom, it's almost amazing that we are what we are. But we're way at the bottom. We need to increase tuition, at least at moderate and predictable paces, and we need to make sure students can afford the university by virtue of financial aid, and we're working very hard on that. We agree with the economists that ignoring undergraduate education or failing to understand its importance is a major issue at some research universities. I think our faculty does a great job, but the Madison Initiative for Undergraduates and other initiatives undertaken in the Provost's office are aimed at improving still more what we do in undergraduate education. And I'm speaking less here about students and education because Paul DeLuca, our provost, is going to be giving a presentation on those topics this afternoon to the Education Committee. Diversity and the achievement gap are major emphases for us. We need to diversify the student body, and not only with underrepresented minority students from the United States, but as I said, with more international students, if our students are going to compete when they graduate from our universities. We need to internationalize to a far greater degree. We need more partnerships with some of the global research universities that are listed on this slide that I showed you, and we need more international students. We are very proud of the fact, this slide is familiar to you all, this shows how little financial aid funding we have. This shows that our graduation rates are good and improving. I'm going to go quickly to study abroad because I'm on the topic of internationalization. UW-Madison offers more than 180 study abroad programs in 51 countries and in every discipline on campus. We're in the top 5 for student participation in year-long and mid-length programs, 3rd and 4th respectively among all research institutions, 6th for overall study abroad participation. You can read the rest yourself. And still, we need to enhance the internationalization of the university. We believe that we can do more collaboration internationally. We also think we can do more collaboration right here in our own state. And I look forward to working with the other chancellors on ideas that will help not only Madison be a magnet of the sort that it is, but other areas as well. So our goal is to remain public-spirited, to compete on the scale that I've tried to show you we are considered worldwide to compete on, to be able to match our peers when it comes to the kinds of talent and ideas that we attract and develop here. And I guess what I like to say when I go around and talk to people is, having been here now for a year and a half, this university is extraordinary. And it is a gem that is really quite remarkable. given the modest wealth of this state and the modest population, the fact that people have, with so much discipline, supported higher education over more than 100 years and have helped build an institution of this quality, that's simply a remarkable fact. That it can compete on a world stage in the way that it does is a remarkable fact. I think it is really essential, not simply for the University of Wisconsin-Madison, but for the state and for the nation and for the world, that we continue to compete on that stage. And that takes the support of everyone here and everyone outside the room, and it certainly takes strong leadership and commitment and accountability on the part of those of us at UW-Madison. I can't imagine the state of Wisconsin without UW-Madison operating at the level at which it operates now. I can't imagine where we would replace or how we would replace the expertise in agriculture, in health, in engineering, in the development of pharmacists, nurses, teachers, doctors, artists, journalists, attorneys, graduates who've lived and worked with peers from all over the world, have built networks, have made Wisconsin, put it on the map all over the world. I don't know how we would replace the jobs, generate the technologies and ideas, support the startup companies and the existing industries if we were to lose our stature and fail to attract the kind of talent that we can now attract. I don't know what we could substitute in the state for the university's potential to spur economic growth. I think the state needs a strategy that puts higher education right at the center of its strategy, because education, research, technology development, new businesses, workforce development, economic growth, the sustainability of the environment, alternate energy sources, first-rate health care, critical thinking, and the opportunity to build relationships with talented people from every part of the globe are so urgent, and they've never been more urgent. UW-Madison is just one piece of a system that is outstanding. I think we're a vital piece. I think we're a vital player in a worldwide marketplace of research institutions. I think we need to stay there. And I thank all of you for your support and for allowing me to argue wherever I go that the citizens of Wisconsin want a world-class research university, whether everyone knows it or not. Thank you very much. And now I'm pleased to And now we have our draft video, and then I'll introduce our two faculty members. We'll run into lunchtime, but since you just got here, I hope you'll forgive us for that. Thank you.
I'm convinced that we are creating the leaders of tomorrow, and I'm also convinced that if we don't do it, nobody else will. We bring together at this university people from a very diverse economic and geographical background, and we bring them together with a commitment to serious learning and a commitment to public service. That's in the culture and DNA of our institution.
UW-Madison has a reach beyond the campus to not only bring in people from the local community to get involved statewide, but also national and internationally to get involved in the educational experience that UW-Madison offers.
I've been experimenting with using online technological sources to reach out to communities. We decided a couple of years ago that it made sense to try to do this with the military, in part because we have so many young people who are serving their country from Wisconsin and other parts of this country, and because they're overseas, they don't have the opportunity to get the sort of education they would get if they were here.
One thing that I'm really intrigued by is several of the programs that I'm involved in as a graduate student are the ways that they're trying to get outside the normal boundaries of the university, especially through some of these innovative techniques through distance learning type programs.
I had the students, for instance, write accounts of what was going on in Iran as they were studying the history of American relations with Iran and as they were watching the protests during the election. Many of those writing these reports were dealing with Iranian security issues on the ground in Afghanistan at the same time. We're providing them a context, a space to think through the day-to-day events that they normally don't have time to think through.
Now, as I'm going to go to the Naval Academy and teach the younger generation who are about to go out to the fleet for the first time, it's very important because it allows us to contextualize what's going on in current foreign policy decisions.
It was a remarkable opportunity to bring learning and teaching in different parts of the world together. We have intellectual and social capital around this state that we could use in more innovative ways if we actually bring people together, and it is so fruitful for everything we want to do. It's a real win-win.
The University of Wisconsin-Madison has that ability to spread its wealth, and then as these alumni go out beyond the state borders, they can have an impact internationally.
Many babies do struggle with learning their native language, and many children have language disorders. And so we hope that by understanding what goes right, we can then begin to understand what might go wrong.
By studying how infants and toddlers learn language, we can learn a lot about adult language use as well.
We test many, many babies. I think last year we tested over 1,500 individual babies in our lab from the community in Madison and Dane County.
There's so much developmental research going on here. We have studies on autism, on language learning, on schizophrenia.
Students are an integral part of our research. Any given semester, we have somewhere between 10 and 15 undergraduates who are working in my lab, working shoulder to shoulder with me, with my graduate students, with my postdoctoral students. And they gain an experience that you couldn't have on a campus that wasn't as research intensive as ours.
We study things like how the pitch of language or the tone of something that you say can influence how the kid learns it. We study how rhythm and tempo affect how a kid is going to learn a new word or a new language.
My students have had their work published in some of the top journals in our field while they were sophomores, juniors, or seniors. And that's the kind of experience that really is unparalleled at almost any other university in the country.
What excites me most is that I might be a part of something new, some new discovery about the mind of an infant.
What we're going to see is just an explosion of interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary research where you can see the kinds of questions that I study, how babies learn language. This is informed not just by psychology, but by studies of disorders, studies of linguistics, studies of foreign languages, studies of education. It's all coming together.
The work that we do eventually will have major implications for the general well-being of the public.
We are able to ask questions that no one else is asking. We are able to answer questions that no one even thought to ask. And we're able to move forward the pace of discovery and hopefully be able to help people, small children and their families, make people's lives a little bit better.
In 2004 in Wisconsin, African American infant mortality, that is the number of kids dying before their first birthday, was the highest in the nation. About 91% arises from Milwaukee, Kenosha, Racine, and Beloit.
The Healthy Birth Outcomes Initiative is really focused on helping to promote healthier birth outcomes in those communities and actually to reduce the disparities.
To improve the infant mortality rate is very complex. It requires social support. It requires a better understanding, a better ability to communicate, which we call cultural competence. It requires better health literacy among the population, and it requires good medical prenatal care.
Prenatal care, interconception care, that's a care that occurs between pregnancies, and preconception care, before a woman becomes pregnant. Those are all the health factors that this initiative will look at, but it will also look at the non-health factors that impact health.
This is truly an example of the Wisconsin idea, and while the medical school is transforming into a school of medicine and public health, they are placing students, graduate students and fellows in the health department in Milwaukee and also in Madison in the State Department of Health.
The rest of the nation really is looking to Wisconsin on this. We have been featured on Newsweek Online, the New York Times, and we've actually attracted the best and the brightest of professionals that are working on this issue.
The university has been involved in both research and teaching, but the beauty of this is that it's applied to communities throughout the state. And the Healthy Birth Outcomes Initiative is just one example of how this really works.
It's really about changing the lives of people in the state of Wisconsin, and I think that's what's so exciting about this project.
Okay, now you're really in for a treat. I am delighted to introduce to you Yoshihiro Kawaoke, who is one of the world's foremost authorities on influenza. He studies, as you'll hear, the molecular mechanisms of flu as it relates to transmission within and beyond and between species. The work of Professor Kawaoke has yielded important new methods for speeding up the manufacture of flu vaccines. That's, in a way, almost the least of what he does. I'll let him explain it. I want simply to emphasize, going back to the leverage we get from the quality of our faculty. From his federal grants alone, Yoshi supports a monthly payroll of approximately $100,000 in pay and fringe benefits. And this does not include the recent grant he got from the Gates Foundation, nor does it include anything related to his company, FluGen, which is located in the Research Park and has its own payroll and benefits stream. I'm delighted to introduce the remarkable Yoshi.
Thank you very much. Can I have escape? Okay. Oh. Okay, my name is Yoshi Kawaoke. I'm from the School of Veterinary Medicine, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to discuss some of our work today. So in my laboratory, we work on influenza and also Ebola viruses. But today I'm going to discuss influenza, particularly influenza pandemics. First, I'm going to discuss Spanish influenza pandemic that happened in 1918, and also discuss current influenza pandemic. So this is the causative virus. Here we go. Animation of influenza virus. The influenza virus is unique in that its genome is fragmented into 8 segments. And when we came to Madison about 12 years ago, we established a technology that revolutionized the influenza research, which is the technique called reverse genetics. This technique allows us to make any influenza viruses we like. Okay? So we use this technology, everyone in the field use this technology to understand influenza virus, basic research. But this technology is also used for vaccine production. But I'm going to briefly describe how we do this. Okay. So this is the influenza virus. So we disrupt this influenza virus, and we clone this genome into plasmid DNA and put these molecules into cells. And cells make viral proteins and viral genome and produce influenza virus. So, as I said, this technology is used to produce vaccine called flu mist, and I'm sure you have seen the kids vaccinated like this in TV recently. So this vaccine is used to, this is made by technology that my laboratory established. So now I'm going to discuss 1918 Spanish influenza pandemic. This pandemic was one of the most devastating infectious disease, killed more than 40 million people worldwide. Now, but Spanish influenza virus does not exist, or did not exist until recently, because back in 1918 we did not know how to isolate or how to obtain influenza virus from patients. But the scientists recovered influenza virus genome from lung tissue of a person who died due to Spanish influenza and determined the entire sequence of the genome. Now, with this information and our technology, we can now generate 1918 virus, which we did. Now, some may say, why you make 1918 virus? Okay. But I think it is our responsibility to understand why was the Spanish influenza virus so virulent, so that we can understand why this was pathogenic and we can prevent future devastating pandemic like 1918. So we did many different studies, but I'm going to show you just non-human primate study. So we generated 1918 virus, like I described. And we also used the seasonal influenza virus from human, isolated in 2001. So I'm going to show you what we did. We infected animals, 7 of them with 1918 Spanish influenza virus, 3 of them with seasonal influenza virus, and watch how they behave. And on day 3, after infection, animals infected with Spanish influenza virus lost appetite. On day 6, 2 of them became sick. And on day 8, remaining animals became sick. Now, the seasonal influenza virus infected animals remain healthy. Now, pathologically, when we looked at the lung of animals infected with these viruses, this is a lung of animal infected with seasonal influenza, healthy-looking lung. But this is a lung of animal infected with 1918 virus. This dark area is the area where you have, they have hemorrhage. So it's very difficult to breathe. So we found the Spanish influenza virus is the most pathogenic of all strains of influenza viruses we tested. And I didn't discuss about this, but the abnormal response of the body to infection by Spanish flu may be caused by the inherent virulence of this virus. Now, with this knowledge, we are also studying current influenza pandemic. Now, you may have seen this picture. This is a picture of current pandemic strain taken by CDC. But actually, this virus is a lot more filamentous. Now, this is a technology that allows us to view the cells, scanning electron microscopy. So this is a flat cell, uninfected flat cell. When these cells are infected with this pandemic strain, cells round up. On the surface of cells, you see filaments. And these are all influenza viruses. And this appeared to be interesting enough for Nature to use as a cover when we wrote review early in this pandemic. But when this pandemic occurred, many people died in Mexico due to primary viral pneumonia. Now, if people die due to influenza by pneumonia in winter season, but usually in seasonal influenza, people die due to secondary bacterial pneumonia, not the viral pneumonia. What's unique about this pandemic is that people are dying due to viral pneumonia. That is, the virus replicate and it cause damage to the lung. So we were interested in pathogenicity of this pandemic strain tested in different animal models. And I'm going to show you in non-human primate data. So this is a lung section of uninfected, healthy animals. Okay. So this is alveoli, and this white area is where you have the air, so you can exchange oxygen. When these animals are infected with seasonal benign influenza virus, the alveoli wall becomes slightly thick, but you still have this white area where you can exchange oxygen. Okay? But when animals are infected with this pandemic strain, alveoli are filled with fluid. This pink area, this is the fluid-containing protein that's stained. And also these dark spots are cells, inflammatory cells coming into the lung. Okay, so inflammation, pneumonia. The brown spots are cells infected with influenza virus. So the influenza virus actively, this pandemic strain actively replicates in the lung. Unlike seasonal influenza virus, which is very difficult to find virus-infected cells in lung. So we have shown that the 2009 pandemic H1N1 virus grows well in lung of non-human primates, and that's why this pandemic virus causes viral pneumonia. Now, our work is done in the Influenza Research Institute, shown in this slide. We are located in Research Park, and actually, this is renovated. Several years ago, I was recruited from a different university, and the university and WOLF were kind enough to renovate this building. So they completely removed the contents. The only thing that is left is just a frame. And the reason why we really appreciate is this: we were short of highly contained laboratory, and this building allowed us to do many different studies, and I very much appreciate the support. So my laboratory do basic research to understand why humans die upon viral infection. That's my long-term goal. And also do applied research to develop vaccines and to gain knowledge on better use of antiviral drugs. Thank you very much.
I'm sure you'd like to ask questions. Yoshi will be at lunch, so you have an opportunity to speak with him at that time. And now I'm delighted to introduce our last speaker presenter for this morning, John Peevahouse, who's in the Faculty of Political Science. Like Jeremy Suri in the Department of History, he works on foreign affairs. He's one of the leading experts on American foreign policy and international relations in the country, and his specialties include the promotion of democracy, the politics of free trade agreements, and conflict among nations. He's an important resource on such current events as President Obama's decision to send more troops to Afghanistan, and he's going to speak a little bit about Afghanistan. Earlier this year, the International Studies Association gave him the Karl Deutsch Award, awarded to an international relations scholar under the age of 40 who has made the most significant contribution to the study of international relations. And he received a Distinguished Teaching Award in 2003. John Peevahouse.
Thank you, Chancellor Martin, and thank you all for having me come and talk. It's an honor to be able to speak to you today. One thing Chancellor Martin did not mention before we get into kind of the depth of the research project that I want to talk to you about today is that unlike Professor Kawoka, I was lured away from the University of Wisconsin in 2007, a year in which the political science department saw 7 departures, some from retirements, but other from outside offers. And I left for the University of Chicago in 2007 and have returned this summer back to Madison. And one reason I came back, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a second, was the great department that we built. After those departures in 2007, the political science department here, and with the support of the university more broadly and the College of Letters and Sciences, really went all out to rebuild and recover from that departure. And in my field in particular of international relations, they were active in hiring a tenured professor away from Harvard, a tenured professor away from Penn, and was able to really kind of rebuild the area, which made it extremely attractive professionally to come back to. One thing Chancellor Martin mentioned that I really want to underscore in my talk today is political science here. And this is just a little data that we have on the number of degrees as total BA degrees at the University of Wisconsin. And you'll notice that political science, upwards of 10%, 1 in 10 of all BAs are political science majors here at the university. It's both, we chalk it up to something beyond our control, which is that, as you may or may not know, Madison's a pretty active political town. And secondly, the fact that we really take pride in our teaching and our research and integrating our students into our research. We've had about 8 Distinguished Teaching Award winners in the last 5 years alone from our department. And so we really take pride in both the research that we do. We're ranked 16th nationally in the political science department, and the teaching that we do as well. My students, when I came back, asked, why'd you come back? Why come back to Madison? As I mentioned, professionally, it was an attractive option. Personally, my wife and my kids missed Madison a lot, and can never pay too much for that. As my wife put it, why live in a city that's an 8 when you can live in a city that's a 10? So we're happy to be back. And last, and certainly not least, the undergraduate students here are just phenomenal. From the day I walked in, the first day I walked in to kindergarten until the day I received my PhD, I'm a product of public schools. And there's an ethos and there's just sort of a feeling around the University of Wisconsin and the system as a whole. Public education still is in some ways the last great equalizer we have in this country. And it was really sad to not be teaching as many great undergraduates as I was here. Not to say the Chicago undergraduates are not smart, not as hardworking, but let's just say that their freshman year, most U of C undergrads as a freshman wear around a student that has the U of C crest on the front, and on the back has this. So, a great institution, but I'm very happy to be back and thrilled to be teaching again at the University of Wisconsin. So let me tell you a little bit about my own research that I've been involved in now for about a year. It's kind of the next big project I'm working on here. Foreign lobbying. We all know about lobbying, right? And on the domestic front, people pay interest groups lobby Congress, they lobby the state legislature, they lobby the White House, they lobby the governor's office. But it turns out a lot of folks lobby over issues relating to foreign policy and foreign affairs. How much? Well, the last year that we have data on is about $640 million spent by foreign agents. These could be foreign companies that don't have headquarters in the United States. These could be foreign countries. These could be political parties abroad. These could be international organizations like OPEC that pay to hire lobbying firms in Washington, D.C. So what we want to ask is, why do they lobby? What's the impact overall? And in what issue areas do they lobby? So it was the headline of the New York Times about 2 months ago in the wake of a coup in Honduras by a military junta there. As you can see, the first line of the Times story is, first depose a president, second hire a lobbyist. The junta went on full-fledged, paying millions of dollars, hiring D.C. lobbyists to work the halls of Congress, to work the White House, to convince the White House and Congress, we aren't that bad, we're not abusing human rights, we will have elections someday. So this gets a lot of attention in the public press. No doubt, in no small part due to one of my former colleagues at the University of Chicago, John Mearsheimer and Stephen Walt. John and Steve's book, The Israel Lobby, has been a very controversial entry into the discourse on foreign lobbies, claiming that when America has made foreign policy over the last 2 decades, it's not been in the interests of Americans and American foreign policy, but rather Israel, and that AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Group, has been exceedingly successful at directing American foreign policy in ways that they argue are bad for the long-run interests of America. I say, unfortunately, this is the state of the discourse. Steve and John may be right or wrong, but one thing that's clear is that their book is based on mostly some idiosyncratic evidence, a handful of interviews, and absolutely no data. In other words, there's not much social science behind it. There's not much sort of in-depth research that's done on any kind of replicable data source to say, well, how does this work? Why does this happen? Sometimes the Israel lobby fails. Sometimes it succeeds. Why does that happen? The same is true of lobby. There's large literatures on other ethnic lobbies, the Indian lobby, the Taiwan lobby, the China lobby. The list is long. And all of it reads much like the Mearsheimer and Walt book, which are sort of these invectives and arguments about, well, this is good, this is bad, this is true, this is false. So what our research team is trying to do now is actually bring some social science to this and bring some data to this to discover under what circumstances does lobbying change policy, under what circumstances and what policy areas might this be true, and might some of these lobbies be doing absolutely nothing. So we're starting our investigation with something called the Foreign Agent Registration Act. This was an act passed by Congress in 1938 on the eve of World War II. Clearly it was a bit before America gets involved in World War II, but on the eve of the European War, Congress had become incensed that Nazi propagandists were invading their offices in Washington with all kinds of propaganda about why the U.S. should stay out of the Second World War, why we should not adopt something like a Lend-Lease program. Now, Congress itself was divided on whether we would get involved in World War II, if you'll recall, but they weren't divided on where that national interest should be defined by, and that was American interest, not German interest, not Soviet interest at the time. And so they passed a law that required anyone who lobbied Congress or the President or the White House to essentially tell the Department of Justice who you hired, how much you paid them, and why were they lobbying, over what issues were they going to lobby. This has been on the books since 1938, still on the books today. No one has ever gone back and taken a systematic examination of this data. So after 9 months of haranguing the Justice Department, and ironically this office is located in their counterterrorism division, after 9 months of haranguing the Department of Justice, they sent me about 125,000 pages of documents, which go back to 1941, on who's lobbied Congress over what issues and why. So now we can actually bring some systematic research and evidence to bear on when do people lobby, when do they get something, when do they not. The last footnote I'll mention here is this last point. FARA, starting in 1938, specifically outlaws foreign actors making campaign contributions. This, after all, is how we think interest groups work in the U.S. You add to the coffers of a candidate or a political party, and maybe they'll be nice to you the next time a vote rolls around. Turns out that can't actually work in this case, and that leads to some complications for the research, which I'll talk about in a minute. So what does this data look like? Well, we started in 2008, and we're working our way back, trying to uncover this. We've got about 11 years done so far. Here's total in red in terms of how much these foreign lobby agents have been paid by foreign governments, by foreign political parties. Again, it's not trivial amounts of money. These are in millions of dollars on our scale here. Trade, which is how I initially got interested. I was interested to see how foreign governments try to influence American trade policy. Trade is the largest single area in which foreign governments and foreign actors lobby. And 98% of the time, I would say, they're always lobbying for trade preferences or free trade for the U.S. or some access to the American trade market. So already one sort of very brief conclusion we've got from the data and just sort of getting our hands dirty with it. Notice the precipitous fall in trade lobbying in the 90s and as the Bush administration arrives. Well, there's two easy explanations for this. Right? One is that trade lobbying had actually reached nearly an all-time high in the mid-90s due to things like NAFTA, negotiations over the Central American Free Trade Agreement. And then as Republicans come in, both in the White House and Congress, the lobbying falls because, if you would ask, and we've got a few surveys to show this, most foreign governments, most foreign actors believe Republicans are free trade, Democrats aren't, so you don't need to lobby, right? Why pay money if it's going to happen anyway, right? It's just wasted dollars. So it falls. As Democrats come back, lo and behold, up goes the lobbying again. So again, sort of, it's not that it always works, it's not that it always fails, it's conditional, right? And there's various patterns if you actually have the data that you can kind of glean out of this. One of the more interesting slides. So here are the top 15 countries, which account for about half of the money paid. A couple things to point out here, actually 3 things to point out. First, the country that spent the most was Poland. Why Poland? Well, what's going on in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s is Poland's trying to get into NATO, right? And they're lobbying hard to try to convince Congress. The expansion of NATO was an exceedingly expensive undertaking on the part of Congress and the Clinton administration. They're trying to convince Congress this is the right thing to do. They're also trying to get the U.S. to twist European arms to let them in the European Union at the time. And they spent hundreds of millions of dollars to do that. Let me second point to you that Israel's near the bottom. Right? They're actually number 15 of the top 15. Why? Because AIPAC, one of the main lobbying groups for Israel, are not Israelis. They don't actually fall under the purview of this law. These are American citizens lobbying on behalf or to get preferences for the Israeli government. These are Americans, which sort of begs the question, why don't the Poles do the same thing? Right? Why do different countries choose different lobbying strategies? Chicago, after all, is the second largest Polish city in the world. Right? But yet they don't take advantage of their tremendously large diaspora in the United States to push policy, whereas Israel takes advantage of their ethnic and religious cleavage ties in the United States to try to push policy initiatives there, and only spend a very relatively small amount of money on direct lobbying, which again suggests there's some more puzzles that we're sort of still finding and still trying to bring an answer, to come up with an answer to. The last thing are the Caribbean islands, probably jumped out at you. 2 words, gambling and taxes there. Right? Online gambling tends to be located in these offshore Caribbean islands. These are lobbies of Congress not for them to convince them not to shut these down, and also not to shut down investment opportunities or favored investment or tax status opportunities for the Caribbean islands. So again, just from an initial look at the data, simple statistics, right? You get some kind of different answers on what you think might be going on in the lobbying world. One thing we're kind of interested is, again, how does it work? And this is going to kind of get us away from the data and more into interviews, sort of doing some field work that I'm starting to set up with some of my students now, talking to folks in Washington and abroad. Obviously, you can do sort of the direct lobbying, make the rounds, shake the hands. Again, people often think campaign contributions, but if you're an international actor, it doesn't work. It's illegal. You occasionally hear instances of this happening. Under the Clinton administration in particular, there were a couple of instances where the Clinton campaign was forced to return foreign campaign contributions. Maybe voting, if your diaspora exists in a large enough block. This is the story often told about Cuban Americans, that right, they can actually bring to bear a number of votes in important elections in Florida, and so they have leverage over leverage that they otherwise might not have. And finally, one of the things that I think is really going on here is an issue of public relations. Turns out what a lot of these lobbying firms do isn't go meet with Congress people. They don't go out and try to stage electoral rallies. What they do is they try to get articles in the New York Times. They buy ad space in Foreign Affairs. They try to create a fundamental narrative about a country or about an ethnic group or about a people that suggests that their interests are aligned with America's interests, and that by helping them out, you're really helping out yourself. Right? Let me give you two pretty infamous examples of this that we found in the data. Both of them dealing with Afghanistan, a country that's been in the news a bit of late. The man on the right is a guy named General Rashid Dostum. Dostum is the head of the Northern Alliance. It is ethnic Uzbek who fought with the Soviets during the Soviet invasion. He also helped us unseat the Taliban early in 2001. Dostum is famous for a couple of things. One are his human rights abuses. He's generally argued by Amnesty International and even the U.S. State Department as being one of the worst perpetrators of human rights violations in the northern part of Afghanistan. He's also infamous for hiring about a half a dozen D.C. lobbying firms for estimated tens of millions of dollars to essentially go to Congress and tell people that he is the answer to Karzai. Right? If you don't like Karzai, you think he's corrupt, I'm your guy. Right? I helped you get the Taliban out. I helped you start this war. I can help you end it. Right? And so this isn't just sort of minor tweaks of trade preferences people are lobbying over. These are fundamental issues in American foreign policy. The second example, if you look through this data that we've been sort of poring over, there's a group called Sherzai Investments. And Sherzai Investments is run by two brothers, the Sherzai brothers. And those are them saluting on the bottom. The kind way to think about Sherzai Investments is this is an investment company run by these two individuals who's going to rebuild Kandahar after the war. The not so kind way to think about this is these guys are two Pashtun warlords who are knee-deep in the drug trade and who are trying to funnel USAID money to some of their own ethnic Pashtuns who are also knee-deep in the drug war to try to bring peace to southern Afghanistan. These two guys over the last 3 years have hired a lobbying firm ironically named the Four Horsemen in Washington, D.C. To try to lobby again for increased aid through USAID to Kandahar, to rebuild Kandahar, and to essentially give them a better position and to exert pressure on Karzai himself to allow them to take over more control of the southern part of Afghanistan. So this is high politics, this is low politics. It's all over the board. And like I say, we're only about 12 months into this, but so far, if this is any indication, there's going to be a lot of interesting stories found in this data. Let me conclude with telling you a bit about my research team. A couple of my undergrads I brought today, I don't know if you can see them. Brian is over in the corner. Brian Egan is a senior from Neenah, Wisconsin. Brian's a political science major, also sits on the Madison City Council. Then Jen Winter is from Appleton, Wisconsin. Jen's another one of our poli-sci majors. Both of these guys have been working hard. Jen is actually a member of a very unique program here at Madison, which allows you to combine your senior year of undergraduate with a one-year MA program through our La Follette School of Public Policy. And Jen is one of the phenomenal members of that community as well. Two graduate assistants. Like I say, we'll hire two more undergrads the next semester. These folks are doing more besides data entry. They're sort of helping me suss through these databases. They're finding data from something called the Legislative Disclosure Act, and they're analyzing the traditional FEC, Federal Election Commission data. They've begun to initiate case studies. They've gone out. They've made some calls about interviews to try to set up some field work, some with former UW alum, for better or worse, in this area. And trying to involve them in this, as much as possible. We're learning together. I think that's the exciting thing about having a research team, mostly of undergraduates, working at a large research university like UW. You're learning at the same time. We're digging through this data together. We're talking to folks. We're learning. And most of these undergraduates will be at some point helping me write up part of this, either as journal articles or a longer book-length project. So thanks a lot for letting me speak to you, and thanks so much for your support.
Well, so that's 2 out of 2,500 faculty members and 1 or 2 out of 42,000 students. So it was very hard to make a selection about what to present or who should present. I think they did brilliantly. I was wondering if Jen and Brian could stand up so everyone can see who you are, because you'll be at lunch, I think, and then the regents and chancellors and others might want a chance to talk to you. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you all. It's now lunchtime, and thank you for listening.